it's so amusing to see the waves go crash down on me and drag me into the sea. Why is it so easy to be so indifferent to me when I wear my heart on my sleeve?
Welcome to Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies. I'm Rob Duenas, full-time designer, illustrator, and graphic artist esquire. This is an unedited podcast, which means there will be cursing from time to time, so please be aware. That said, here we go.
Like a willow tree, getting pulled down by gravity. By gravity. By gravity. By gravity.
Okay, hey, and we're back. Hey, Rob D here, graphic artist esquire. And this is Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies, graphic artist. So, the hell am I talking about? So this episode's called I Am a Graphic Artist. What I'm trying to do is you know, we as a society like to label people things, right? Everyone gets a title, a job description, a rank, as we had in the army. Yeah, at the job, you get art director, creative director. And a lot of times, people want to know, what kind of artist are you? You know, are you a painter, an illustrator, graphic designer? And I've never really quite been able to fully quantify what the hell it is I do. I do a lot of different things, from t-shirt design, illustration, typography, you know, magazine layout, coloring, all these sorts of things. But beyond what I'm doing, I've consistently throughout the content, it has a certain flavor, you know, has a certain feel. I've been told everything from it's like Cliffhanger and Image in the 90s, and you know, it's like video games and anime and Western and Eastern and like pop art. And a friend of mine, my buddy Chris, out there in Germany, older guy than me, so sometimes he has a little bit of wisdom from every now and then. You know, he drops a few, and he called me a graphic artist. He goes, you know, you're a graphic artist, Rob, because you know, I've never really been interested in rendering or illustrating people photorealistically. I've done it, you know, I've done portrait art. You know, I've sat there and I can shade you perfectly so it looks just like you, as if you really existed. It doesn't interest me. I guess my mind as a child always gravitated toward lines and line art and urban sketching style things, contour line art, technical illustrations. Hold on. My goodness. So, I know when I was a child, one of the things I really liked to do when I went to the supermarket is they'd have the magazine aisle, and I would go up on there and they'd have these architectural plans you could buy, like build your own home, right? But inside would be all these really cool technical illustrations of homes, like cottages and floor plans. And I just always loved the way those looked. When I would look at landscape art and I would see how they would draw the lines, and they wouldn't be perfectly connected, but they would be watercolored and painted. That sort of thing, you know, really appealed to me. I wasn't able to process that. I've been thinking about it a lot the last couple months, really. And that really always, like, attracted me more than, say, like a Frazetta painting, even though I knew a Frazetta painting was insanely more difficult and it was, like, fucking hella cool. And that guy's a genius. Probably the greatest illustrator of our time. Made the shit all up in his mind. But for me, like, the kind of art that I want to put on my wall would be that kind of stuff. So I thought early on I was going to be like an architectural artist or something, like an architect or something. But then, you know, you have to learn like how to build stuff and math. And I was like, I just want to draw like that. Like those guys who draw those books. Can I get that job? Which apparently I kind of couldn't. But that's what I've always sort of appreciated. So somewhere between illustrator and so-called graphic designer, you know, somewhere between, if you could line them up together like a ice cream sandwich, right? The vanilla center would be graphic artist. And you know, I sort of put someone like, well, how do I say this? They'd love to just drive by the window. You know, like heavy metal would be graphic art. You know, Simon Bisley would be a graphic artist, and I guess Frazetta would be a graphic artist. He's more than fine art. He did a lot of pop culture stuff. He did ads, advertising, book covers. In graphic art, to me, and the difference I sort of try to paint is there's like plein air, there's high-end illustration, fine art, okay, photorealistic fine art, impressionistic fine art, and then you got the guys that paint the backgrounds on the Clone Wars cartoons, or they do tattoo illustration, or they do commercial illustration, and for me, graphic art has an edge to it. It looks a little unrefined, maybe, in some of its execution. It's not so perfect. A lot of pop shapes, a lot of pop color. To me, it's like the attitude sort of Metallica version, of say fine art, or modern art. Or so-called pop art, really, like the Andy Warhol, whatever. But that's where I sort of place myself in between. And the reason why I'm talking about it now is I want to talk about what it's like for me to work like that. So one of the things I want to talk about is working in various styles. So because of the business I'm in, I've constantly had to flip, quote-unquote, flip styles, depending on the project. Sometimes you want, like Richie Rich, you want a real sort of animated feel to it. Sometimes with Splatterhouse, it needs to be this like really gritty kind of thing. Sometimes I need to go right back in and then do layouts for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends t-shirts, and then Snoopy t-shirts, and then come right back out and draw an enslaved, sexy, kind of like sultry piece, and then come back out of that and do, magazine layouts and custom logos and fonts and ad design, and then come back out of that and draw watercolor commissions or pencil commissions, and then come back out of that and draw some more Richie Rich, and then maybe flip back from that to to a lot of different things. So you want to have the ability to be nimble, and the various styles, like United States sort of Western style, and I would sort of liken that in this medium to be in anywhere from the Jim Lee to Bruce Timm category, very Western in sort of approach. Japanese, styles like anime, so USA would be like the Disney stuff, and Japan would be anime. For me, 90s comics were kind of a big deal. The art was sort of it's like a revival for me. Like, I thought it was like a revival of what was going on in the 70s. If you look at the art in the 70s, like the Alex Ninos and the Neil Adams stuff, and the John Byrne, Dave Crockham and John Romita stuff from the 70s. 90s to me were like the resurgence of that, where it was very poppy, very iconic. A lot of the stuff now in modern comics for me is storytelling based or just straight illustration based. They want to prove that, I don't know, I'm not, and this is hard to say, I'm not trying to lump the whole fucking thing. The zeitgeist I get from observing a lot of the art is that it's there to sort of prove how well drawn it is. And for me, it loses a lot of its iconography. And iconography to me is like a big deal. There's something iconic about Batman jumping, leaping out at you when Jim Lee draws it, or Jack Kirby would be a graphic artist. Just iconic. Jack Kirby's iconic to me, as opposed to the fluid brushwork, the photographic, realistic brushwork of, say, gosh, I don't even follow these guys. We're even now, like the really like Steve McNiven kind of stuff, which is really well drawn and it's very humanistic and realistic. But me personally, I'd rather see Sam Keith draw it, because it would be iconic to me. I'd like to see some mean, evil little monsters. Game art is a big thing. A lot of concept art in games, which I'm on the fence about. It's sort of moved into this, what are those guys? The really well set of designers, the Massive Black, sort of Pasadena art school of design, where everything is like a guy in a techno suit, and it's a silhouette with a techno suit and everything. That's not the kind of game art that I'm talking about, which is pretty much 90% of all Nomad DVDs. I'm more like talking about, if you've seen like the art, like, what would be a great example? Shank is a great example of that. The art behind Team Fortress 2 is a great example of that for me. I love the making of art for the new SXX game is really cool. The way that was sort of constructed. I really enjoy. Well, I do enjoy the more photorealistic stuff. I mean, I like all the art assets they put together to make Uncharted. I think it's freaking awesome. You know, it's wonderful to look at. But you know, like Blizzard would be a great example. I think Blizzard's probably the most modern, like graphic art kind of like thing I could think of. You know, where they seem to manage to keep their artistic, iconic roots, but still, you know, deliver a product that everyone can enjoy. It's still hard, you know, like Diablo 3 is still iconic. It's just darker and a little bit more gritty. And then t-shirt art, which, you know, I'm always on the fence about. Sometimes I didn't mean to get into t-shirts, and I do think that that's a discussion for a later time. But there's everything from what you see on Hot Topic to Design by Humans to Threadless to, you know, to Walmart and everything in between. But t-shirts demand iconography and silhouette and limited storytelling, but wordplay sometimes just attitude, straight attitude. Graphic art in terms of illustration for me, which would be another part to talk about, would be not so much realistic anatomy, but sort of designed, exaggerated anatomy. And, you know, Angel Medina is like a fantastic artist, if you want to look at a guy whose mind is open, right? Who can take shapes and twist them and play with perspective and still maintain a strong technical ability while doing that. Doesn't fall apart. The man's like just naturally gifted. I mean, he works at it obviously, but I'm just saying his mind is open. You know, he's Neo. Shape play would be a good example of this. Sean Galloway is a good artist who understands shapes and shape design really, really well. You could probably call him a master at it. Joe Madureira, I think, is a brilliant shape artist. And those are the volumetric shapes that are like underneath the illustration. They're fine illustrators. I'm not taking that away. But their art is three-dimensional. It leaps off the page, you know. Has weight to it. And these are not tangible weight. The paper isn't heavier. It's an intangible thing. It's a feeling. It's a mood. And then, of course, quote-unquote style. So what I mean by style isn't this is how I draw. It's an attitude. A lot of people can draw their own way or draw in a style. But for me, style is really about attitude. You know, when your art has a certain something, like I feel like the characters are looking at me or they're striking a pose, or, you know, it's like when you see an entertainer like Michael Jackson, when he got rest his soul, or anybody else, you know, sort of take the stage and they command the stage. They have a presence and an attitude, and for lack of a better terminology, gravitas, you know, whatever. But there's something about that style, that straight attitude, that raw, visceral feel that it can invoke, regardless of technical ability. And I would say Bisley would probably be one of those guys. There's a lot of Bisley clones, you know, who've come and gone, and they draw really well. But his girls, they have an attitude about them. You know, whether the art is so-called pretty or ugly, they have an attitude about them. Scott Campbell, J. Scott Campbell's always had like an attitude about his art. Bill Sienkiewicz, you know, has a lot of artistic, looser sort of scratches and stuff, but his art has an attitude, like it speaks to me. Drew Struzan would be another artist that I would put in that category. Like he has a Struzan style. I mean, that fucking coined an entire industry. But beyond that, you can emulate what he's doing technically, but it's hard to say. It's an intangible thing. The way he does it, they look at me. Like I can tell whether Drew's did something or someone else did something because it's the hand behind the art that sort of, it's fed in there somehow. And that sort of, to me, transcends raw technical ability. You know, it's a great example of this, and it's a small little thing, is Jonan Vasquez, you know, the creator, I hope I said that right off the top of my head, but the guy who created, you know, Invader Zim. You know, his Johnny Homicidal Maniac stuff and his Zim stuff, they all have an attitude. And they're not they're not insanely articulated, illustrated characters, but they have something that a lot of people I've seen draw goofy little goth characters don't have. You know? And you can't teach someone that, I don't feel. I've tried to explain to people this sort of thing, and it comes through you. And I've tried my best to allow that to come through as much as possible when I draw. I try to be resonant, like the feelings that I want it to feel come out in the art. And on T-shirts, you have no choice. You have to really learn how to do that quick. If you're trying to get playful, it has to be playful. If you're trying to get aggressive, it has to be aggressive. And just because you throw some textures or some splats on there isn't always going to do it. You know, there's something about that. You could put, I have secret plans, and have Snoopy with the map and put these little map dots behind him and little X's and little wood stocks planning things out, and that's playful. Then I can put, I have secret plans, and Charlie Brown could be standing there looking at you with a certain look in his hands together, and that changes the complete attitude or the vibe of the piece. So that's sort of what I'm talking about. And then to segue into that sort of thing, T-shirts. You know, T-shirts is really where I was able to sort of take all the things I had learned so far, illustration, Photoshop, painting, things like that, and sort of like condense them into small little microcosm pieces. And that's, you know, with design, drawing for an audience, a specific audience, whether it's a store, a customer, taking elements that are pre-existing, taking the same elements everyone else has been using and having to rearrange them on a page so they look fresh. Layout, you know, T-shirts, you have a very minimal amount of space. Sometimes you have half a shirt to work, sometimes you have a full shirt to work with, which seems to be the case nowadays. Everyone wants a giant full piece, but I like to work mostly in the upper chest area. Like I like a little rectangular piece. I think if it works in that piece, that sort of body zone, then it'll work on a giant shirt. You don't need to have a big fucking giant Chipmunks, Alvin and the Chipmunks fucking design on your shirt to make something resonate. Typography is a big deal. I learned all about typography, how to draw my own, how to draw within fonts, take fonts and reshape them, warp them, build around them. So you can take the same fonts everyone else has been using and completely change it, and how to make text work beyond just I type something on a shirt. You know, when I see these like cafe press things where people just type and it goes on a shirt, I'm thinking like, well, clever slogan, but they've never learned how to really play with words and fonts. You can take always, you know, let me see, being green, right? And between using two different fonts, you know, you could flip the entire feel of that. You could do a wide, thin, you could do a thin, bold bean, and then the green could be bubbly and round, or in a Ninja Turtle font. It's either, again, it flips. I can do being green as Kermit the Frog. I can also do being green as Ninja Turtles, and I can do being green as the Hulk, and have 3 different completely font ways for that. And those are just based on the licenses. I can take the licensed feel out of those fonts. So the Hulk would be like that big Hulk brick font, right? I can take that out of there and then just spray paint it on a shirt, or watercolor it on a shirt, or use, you know, various comic book fonts, or use an affliction style font. And you can change the complete connotation just with the type of typography. And I sort of try to bring that back into my illustration. You know, when I'm designing around a certain element or a perspective or a logo, I try to keep the logo and the comic book elements, I want them to work with the art, not against it. And I design with the logos and those elements on the page. And I think about changing the colors of those logos and those elements to fit, and how I can sort of get the character to interact with the logo if at all possible. A lot of the guys I work with, half of them like it, half of them don't, you know. I'll always do that moving forward with my own stuff. And then my watercolor art, which, look, I'm not trying to be a fine artist with that stuff. I just sort of enjoy doing it, and whatever that comes. Right now, I really seem to enjoy running water. I just like the look of it for some reason, and it's nice to do something that I'm not trying to flip too many styles over. I like the various layers of transparency in watercolor, and I get to just drip off the page and so forth. Being flexible, let's talk about that. Catering to, understanding who your audience is when you're designing things. You want to be a little cognizant of who it's going to. You know, if I'm designing Smurfs for, say, you know, Hot Topic goth kids, it's way different than designing Smurfs for, you know, like an urban, you know, Dr. J's website, right? So you really want to be a little aware of who your audience is before you start building something. And then art. So the kind of things that really sort of interest me, again, coming back to what I was initially talking about, was, you know, the original Image Comics guys, Mirage Studio, Heavy Metal, you know, Cliffhanger, you know, Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli. I love that stuff. I like Pixar. Mostly I like the Brad Bird stuff more than the other project they've done. Like, I like The Incredibles. I like Ratatouille. I'm really looking forward to Brave, though. I think that looks really phenomenal. I love Coraline, things like that. So again, to really sort of get back into the difference between, why even put this out? Why even say, well, I'm a graphic artist, how about you? Is I think there's a lot of us out there. I think there's a lot of people who are graphic artists, and it's not graphic designer. And I don't really even like that term. To me, graphic design has a lot of really negative feelings for me. I think it sort of connotates a person who spends way too much time stressing over fonts, like the font packages as they exist, and minimalist design. I get minimalism, I made a t-shirt that sold millions, dude. It's one color. It's very minimal. I get that. But I also believe that, that sometimes I want to sell a world and an experience. And if you want to look at the difference, look at the John Carter marketing for minimal design. That's minimal. It's a guy, and it's a bold fucking font, just like the Prince of Persia shit, right? But had that had the full Drew Struzan treatment to John Carter, and it looked like a magical fucking fantastic place to go, more people probably would have seen the freaking movie. So did that need minimalist design? No. And I don't think everything should. So the graphic designers, I don't really get into it. They tend to not like my art anyway, well, for the most part. When I talk to them, it's so busy. I don't know. I mean, fucking whatever. Fuck them all, dude. I don't. That's gonna come back to haunt me. But I don't get it. I don't want to downer. But then straight illustration. I mean, there's people who are far better illustrators than me. They exist, and if you work at it and you continually draw from photos and you continually render out realistic faces, you're going to produce some pretty fantastic results. But that isn't what interests me. A lot of French art, French animation, French design, like Claire Wendeling and the animation that comes out of there, like The Illusionist from 2010, not the Ed Norton movie, but The Illusionist, the Triplets of Belleville. It's up to me as graphic art. It's not Disney animation. It's not, it's not your Western Disney animation. It's not Japanese anime. It's somewhere in between, and that's really the kind of stuff that I gravitate towards, and I sort of feel that there's more of us out there. And from now on, I'm telling people I'm a graphic artist. I think it sort of fits the mold. With that, I'm going to head out of here. Again, if you have any feedback, if I haven't clarified something, if I've offended you, if you like me or hate me, let me know. My email is rob@sketchcraft, CRAFT.com. That's the name of the podcast, sketchcraft.com. And I will see you all later.